Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online for this evening's panel discussion, Beyond the Submission Guides with editors of science fiction and fantasy magazines. It should be an illuminating event. Hopefully we'll have time for plenty of audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Tonight, we're joined by a wonderful panel of editors. I'm going to introduce all of them, and then we'll get into the interview section. We're joined tonight by F.J. Bergmann. F.J. Bergmann is the poetry editor of Mobius, the Journal of Social Change. I'll be dropping links to everyone's websites in the chat too shortly. She's the past editor of Starline, the Journal of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, managing editor of Mad Hat Press, poetry editor of Weird House Press, and freelances as a copy editor and book designer. She lives in Wisconsin with a husband, intermittent daughters, and a horse or two, and imagines tragedies on or near exoplanets. Her writing includes SFPA Rising Awards for both long and short poems, and SFPA Elgin Awards for 2 recent chapbooks, Out of the Black Forest, a collection of conflated fairy tales, and a catalog of further stars, first contact reports from interstellar expeditions. Winner of the 2017 Gold Line Press Manuscript Competition. She was a Writers of the Future winner. And venues where her poems have appeared include Asimov's Missouri Review, Polu Texni, Spectral Realms, and Vestarian. Her speculative fiction has been published in Abyss and Apex, Little Blue Marble, Pulp Literature, Soft Cartel, and Right Ahead, The Future Looms. We are also joined by J.W. Stebner, who is the editor-in-chief of Hexagon Speculative Fiction magazine. When he isn't reading slush, he's likely playing Dungeons and Dragons, starting a new project, or researching insects. He lives in the Canadian prairies with his amazing partner and 3 rodents. We're also joined by Arley Sorg. He is the co-editor-in-chief at Fantasy Magazine, senior editor at Locus Magazine, associate editor at both Lightspeed and Nightmare magazines, and a columnist for the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, as well as a 2021 World Fantasy Award finalist. He takes on multiple roles, including slush reader, movie reviewer, book reviewer, as well as conducts interviews for multiple venues, including Clark's World magazine, as well as his own site, arleysorg.org. Arley grew up in England, Hawaii, and Colorado, and studied Asian religions at Pittsner College. He lives in Oakland, in non-pandemic times, usually writes in local coffee shops. He is a 2014 Odyssey Workshop graduate. We're also joined by Rob Carroll, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of dark sci-fi and horror publication, Dark Matter Magazine. He is also the creative and art director for the magazine. Dark Matter is on its 2nd year of publication and will turn 2 years old in April, just a few days from now. So we're going to start passing it over to our editors. Our first question is, how did you become the editor of a science fiction magazine or magazines? And we'll start with Arley.
All right, so for me, for the Locust gig, which is my day job where I'm senior editor, it was 100%. I went to a local convention called Baycon, and I made a friend named Effie Seiberg there. Effie had a friend named Tim Pratt, who is senior editor at Locust and an author. He has tons of books and short fiction out. And Locust had a spot open, an entry-level spot, and Tim told Effie, and Effie told Tim about me. And so it was 100%, just right place, right time, and happening to be available. I was just finishing up at Odyssey, and Liza was at ReaderCon, the editor-in-chief. And we linked up at ReaderCon to do an interview, and I did a couple phone interviews. And so I started at entry level, and now I'm senior editor. I've been there since 2014. The fantasy magazine gig is also kind of a mix of Kismet and right place, right time being available. I started with Queers Destroy Science Fiction. Shauna McGuire brought me in to help with that issue as like the head slush reader. And after that, Lightspeed was just like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this? And I was always like, yes, sure, sounds great, sure, I'll try it. And then Christy and I became friends, Christy Yant, and she's one of the publishers for the Lightspeed family. And we were just catching up one day, and I had actually tried to become an editor a couple other ways, a couple times. There's this, I won't say what the mags are, but there's one magazine that went defunct a few years ago, and I talked to the publishers. We had this great conversation. I was gonna bring it back, revitalize it, and be the editor-in-chief. And then that fell through for reasons. And then the same thing happened with another magazine. And then I was thinking about starting one from scratch. And so Christy and I were just catching up. And I was like, yeah, I've been thinking about starting a magazine. And she's like, oh, really? Me too. And we just started totally vibing on this idea about what we wanted it to look like, what we would be trying to do in the industry, how it would be different, how it'd be similar. And then I can't remember which one of us, but one of us was like, what about bringing back fantasy magazine? And then Christy talked to John about it, and John loved the idea. So the rest is history. I was just lucky that by that time I had worked a lot with John and Christy and had developed a relationship, had developed trust, which is huge in this industry. You know, people who don't work behind the scenes don't understand how big trust is and how important it is, because it's so easy for a magazine to close. We're very vulnerable. So trusting the wrong person can be lethal. So I was lucky to be in position to know people and to, you know, I'm grateful that John and Christy trusted me and gave me the opportunity, but that's the story for those two gigs.
And JW?
Mine is almost the opposite, actually. I was writing and I was, you know, researching different magazines, and I started slush reading with a now defunct magazine. I believe it's defunct still, The Weird and Whatnot, which shut down during kind of the start of COVID. And I kind of got to a point where maybe selfishly I kind of went, well, I could probably do this myself. You know, I could figure this all out. This sounds like something I would enjoy doing. So I kind of researched everybody else's magazines and kind of went, okay, well, how does everybody do contracts, and how does everybody do their slush reading, and how does everybody, so there is not a high profile magazine that I haven't creeped their website thoroughly to kind of figure out, you know, what are the ins and outs of how do I just figure this all out. And I remember kind of putting together like mock-up covers of like, oh, you know, wouldn't this be so cool, you know, and showing like my friends and my buddies and being like, oh, you know, like I'd really love to do it, really love to do it. And I remember getting some feedback from people of just being, oh, well, just do it, just do it. So I kind of hesitantly went for it and put out a call and you know, opened the website and did all these different things you have to do when you're thinking of these things. And the response was phenomenal. So I published the first one and I loved doing it, and I kind of kept going, and it's been 8 issues now, 2 years, and I love it.
And FJ, how did you get your start in editing?
Well, I had joined SFPA, and very soon after that, I started volunteering for things. I ended up as the webmaster first, and then got involved in proofreading for Starline. And I'd been doing things long enough and being, I believe, responsible and competent, that when the then editor, Marge Simon, retired, the president at the time, Debbie Kloji, asked me if I would edit Starline, and I said I would. I did it for about 5 years, which I thought was the maximum amount of time one editor should be in place for an organization. as opposed to a private enterprise, since it was an imposition of one person's tastes on what was the official journal for the organization. It seemed to me that editors needed to be in place for at most 5 years at a stretch. Because of the learning curve, less than 2 years was not a good idea. And since then, we had another editor for several years. Then I came back on board to fill in for about a year. And we had one interim editor for the Black Poets issue. And now it's Jean-Paul. I should mention that I'm also editing just one issue of Eye to the Telescope. Eye to the Telescope is online only, and because there aren't quite as many issues with production and print and layout and all that stuff, we have a different guest editor for each issue of Eye to the Telescope and a different theme.
And Rob, how did you get your start in the world of editing?
Yeah, so I would go with kind of that bit of folk wisdom where, you know, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. But what I mean by that is like, I've been in publishing for a long time, traditional publishing. Out of college, many years ago, I worked for Sourcebooks. Then I moved where I got a pretty good education there too, both from the editorial side, and I was also a production artist. So I got to learn the industry, like right out of college, processes, how different departments interrelate, how to leverage, you know, the creative side with the business side. And from there, I worked for a while with a literary agency and PR and marketing. I opened my own marketing firm for about 8 years. And then after that, I went into nonprofit communication, one for a global health, an academic Society of Behavioral Medicine, where I worked as their managing editor too for their peer-reviewed journals. So I had a lot of like experience then from the managing editor side. And then after that, after that, global communications manager for a global refugee resettlement nonprofit. And then that just, I think, further solidified, you know, the best ways to do things, the best ways to communicate, not only with your stakeholders, but, you know, people beyond that, people you're trying to reach. And I think that's a lot of what running a magazine is about, is it not only representing, you know, writers, artists, book designers, it's trying to reach beyond that and bring people in to become stakeholders as well. There's so many people out there that would probably love science fiction fantasy magazines and don't really know they exist, or don't know how to access them, or don't know the best ones to look up. And I think you have to bridge that gap. So I think it's kind of funny that you ask, like, how do you become an editor, when I look at myself more as an entrepreneur in this venture, because I am also like the art and creative director. So I see this more than just editing stories. It's really building what I hope to be a publishing house, something that grows beyond the magazine and could help give authors jobs, artists jobs, and you know, sell magazines, sell books, and create a fan base. So yeah.
Well, thank you all. I realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jean-Paul Garnier. As FJ mentioned, I'm the current editor of Starline Magazine, and I'm also the editor and producer of Simultaneous Times podcast. So moving forward, I'm curious from each of you, what are the most rewarding aspects of editing a science fiction and fantasy magazine? And we'll start with FJ on this one.
Getting to read the poetry. I really, really enjoy reading. I'm very lucky that I read fast, because I have strong opinions. I don't have any trouble, especially not at this point, making decisions about what to include and what not. And to those of you listening, this tends to be flexible. Once or twice, I have inadvertently revisited a rejected submission months later and thought, hey, that one wasn't bad. Why did I reject that? And once in a while gotten in touch with the person and said, hey, I'd like to have that after all. Is it still available? This is something that I think a lot of submitters don't realize is what a crapshoot submitting is. That it depends so much on the editor's individual tastes. I have discovered that there is basically nothing that's unpublishable. Whatever it is, no matter how awful or weird it is, somebody out there will like it. Just keep on sending it.
And
So,
JW, sorry.
oh, sorry. That's really the best part is reading the stuff, finding things that I really like, and then putting it out there for other people to hopefully enjoy. I was kind of pleased at having 2 Riesling winners from the pages of Starline, and a lot of nominees, but 2 actual winners. And I think the first one was the first time in 20 years that a winner had come from Starline. So that was very satisfying.
And JW, what's the most satisfying aspect of it for you?
I would have to agree. I think reading the stories is really the most satisfying, the most rewarding. But I think what I enjoy most of it is getting to share those stories that I've enjoyed so much with the people reading the magazine. That's what I love. I love finding a story and going, oh my gosh, I love this story or this poem. I can't wait for other people to read it, you know, because submitting stories so much, if an author doesn't do, you know, beta reading and kind of ask their friends to read it, usually only the author and maybe a couple other people have read the story. So when it comes to me and I read it and I go, I love it, I need to have it, I need to publish this, the most satisfying part to me is, you know, making that proof, sending it out into the world and kind of going, okay, what's going to come back? You know, who is it going to be as enjoyed as I did? And even if it isn't, there's kind of that part of me that's like, I got to share my enjoyment of that writer's work with everybody else. And that's the most enjoyable part, I think.
How about for you, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd venture a guess that that would kind of be most editors' answers. It is mine too, discovering, or not even necessarily discovering a new writer, but just being part of a writer's journey or an artist's journey. And you know, they're always, people don't get to see how like grateful they often are to get an opportunity. Like Dark Matter magazine is a small outfit right now, and but the gratitude that they show and the excitement they show for getting to, you know, publish in our venue, it's a special feeling, and that is definitely the most rewarding. But I'll say, just to switch up the answer, I'll say another rewarding aspect is just creating cool stuff. Like me and my team love to create fun things, and like who wouldn't want to do that? So like we feel very lucky.
And Arley, how about for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of a corny, cheesy, sappy guy. So for me, definitely like first connecting with a piece, especially you're like reading, and then this piece just like knocks you out, and it's a really special feeling. And then one of the great things about social media, amongst, you know, the many terrible things, but one of the great things is when you publish a piece and you get these people who are like, this piece meant so much to me, blah, blah, blah. That, like, I don't usually say anything, but seeing connecting with the piece, connecting with the author, and then seeing people connect with that piece as well, and seeing people find, you know, a lot of meaning and depth in those pieces. It's really important to me. It's really, I get a lot of, you know, I get a lot from that. I also like kind of what Rob said, like when I made this collage about from the full year of the covers of Fantasy Magazine for 2021. And when I was finished with the collage, just looking at the product of a year, you know, looking at what we had created, I mean, it felt really cool just to do that and to be part of that and to, you know, be contributing to the community in that way. So it's really, it can be really amazing. Yeah.
On the flip side of that question, I wonder for each of you, what are the most difficult and challenging aspects of editing and writing science fiction and fantasy magazines? And we'll start with Rob on this one.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I think the obvious answer is it's a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts, especially for magazines like, for example, Dark Matter. And I know a lot of magazines out there that also like do audio or do print issues, but even if you're an online only magazine, it's a ton of work. So that's obviously like one of the most challenging things is especially because magazines are on a schedule. So like we're trade publishing, if you need to, you can push an anthology, you can push a novella. This you're kind of set, and you have to really have good processes and good workflows in place because it could kind of crumble on you pretty quickly. So that's definitely challenging. And from a personal standpoint, rejections are always challenging because like you never want to like say no to somebody. It's just part of the business though. So I think everyone understands that, but it's still tough. Like you'd love to accept everybody, but it's just not a realistic thing to hope for.
My heart is still broken every time I send a rejection letter. How about you, JW?
I would have to agree. I mean, I think the toughest one for me is, you know, obviously you try to keep a bit of like editor author kind of distance and, you know, a professionalism to it, but really interacting with people on Discord or on Twitter or wherever you're, you know, interacting with your authors and your readers, you kind of start to begin to form these relationships with these people, even if it is just online, you know. And it's tough when you have your kind of friends or people that you've met throughout the years doing this that send you a story, and you know, it's kind of one of those like, hey, I think you're really gonna like this one, and then you do, and then you're like, but it doesn't really fit, or it's not the right time for it, or it's not, you know. So those are tough moments for me when you're writing that email and it's just the tears are, you know, crawling down your face as you're like, this isn't the right time for this one, you know, or I can't wait to read the next one. And usually it's very sincere, but through email, it's tough to kind of show that sincerity of, no, really, keep submitting. I want to read your stuff. Keep sending it in because, you know, it just wasn't right this time. I think that's tough for me for sure.
How about you, Arley?
The most challenging aspects of running a genre magazine, I think one is transition periods, you know, COVID, personal things like I just moved, stuff like that. A lot of real life stuff comes up, and it's hard sometimes to hit the things that you're supposed to hit with the magazine when real life is getting in the way. And this will be different for different people. You know, different people face workloads different ways. You know, like Neil Clark had a heart attack while he was running his magazine. It's like, how do you put out a mag when you are in the hospital? And the Thomases, you know, will read Slush when they're in the hospital and stuff like that. And so I think sometimes the toughest thing is just like, you know, I got to go take care of Slush, and I also need to make sure all this paperwork happens, and I don't have time to do both. or I gotta go, you know, I have to finish selling my car, or I gotta go do this other thing, or this other thing came up. Like, it's been a really tough period of time. And deadlines, I mean, slushing is difficult. Sending rejections is difficult, especially when it's somebody that I know personally, or a friend, or somebody that I think is going to be offended, and I see them around. I know a lot of people from Locus, so, or a piece that, we're writing like 4 stories an issue, 12 issues a year, so there's going to be pieces that we have to reject that we actually really like. And that can be really difficult sometimes, because it's like, if I had budget for like 10 more pieces, this issue would have 10 more pieces in it, literally. And we don't have budget for that. And sometimes the other thing that can be difficult is just interactions with certain people in the field. This comes up a lot with Locus. It comes up at conventions, because I go to conventions a lot. Most people are great. Most people are polite. They're, they're smart. They want the same kind of community that I want, or that we want. But some people are not great. Their motivations aren't great, or they just don't have the perspective, and they can be really jerks. And so that has been really difficult sometimes too. So, it just depends. But at the end of the day, running a magazine is pretty great, y'all. It can be super stressful. It can be like, I have days where I'm like, why am I doing this? But it's awesome.
And how about you, FJ?
Well, I think juggling all the responsibilities is a bit of a problem. I mean, for over a decade now, I've been SFPA's webmaster. I've done all the layout for all the print publications. And for most of the period that I was doing Starline, I was handling the actual mailing as well, which was a good 7 or 8 hours to put everything together, to compile the mailing lists, make the labels, sort out all the postage. I'm really lucky now that I haven't had to do the mailing for quite some time. It's mostly been those sorts of deadlines and trying to make sure that nothing's forgotten, that you made all the corrections that needed to be made when the proofs were sent out. One of the most difficult things that happened was when a contributor who had unfortunately contributed about 6 pages to that particular issue, something like, over 10% of the journal, at the very last minute had a hissy fit and wanted to withdraw everything they contributed. And fortunately they changed their mind, but I kind of said to myself, if this happens, if I have to reorganize the entire issue because, somebody's being a jerk, I'm going to make sure every other editor I know hears about this, because you just don't do that to a publication. Other than that, it's been basically relaxing and pleasant. And Mobius is only online, and in comparison to issues with print, that's just a piece of cake. I love online journals because A, the color is free, and B, you can fix it anytime. It's never too late.
I don't think a lot of authors realize that editors do speak with each other. But I think this is going to be an important question for our audience, all the writers in the audience here. aside from following the submission guidelines, which please follow them, what are some things that authors should really consider before submitting? Let's start with Rob on this one.
Yeah, usually, well, as an editor, and when we build the submission guidelines, whether it's for the magazine or how Dark Matter is doing a couple anthology calls right now, or will be throughout this year. And when we build these submission guidelines, we try to close any gaps in understanding. So if there are, that does kind of fall on us. We try to like direct writers as best as we possibly can. But with that said, what writers could always do is, I think a lot of editors will say read the magazine, simply because there is an editor is going to have a certain preference. Like they're going to have maybe a certain style they like, a certain theme, or for Dark Matter, for example, could even be broader than that. I mean, Dark Matter we try to stick to the darker side of science fiction and leaning more towards sci-fi horror. And sometimes we do get submissions that are science fiction but are not dark at all. And the story could be great, but that just isn't going to fit with our magazine. So I don't think that Rejection, which it will obviously be Rejection, will tell you much about the piece you wrote or your compatibility with the magazine, because it was something beyond your writing skill or beyond the power of the story. It was more just a fit issue. So I would definitely try to do some of your own research and figure out, like, what is this magazine looking for, and specifically what are these editors looking for. And you can usually find that online, and if not, reading a few stories, I think you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly.
How about you, Arley?
What authors should think about before they submit, besides submission guidelines, which are amazing guidelines to follow. I think my biggest suggestion is to just take one last look at your work and ask yourself if it's really ready, if you've really put the work into the work. I think that a lot of times people don't interrogate their own writing enough, or they don't get somebody else to look at it, or they don't want to listen to the feedback they get. And I think so many stories that come in could easily be elevated a little bit, could do a little bit better if people took a moment to really think about it. Think about, what are you doing differently? What are you, how are you challenging yourself as a writer to do better? Or are you just putting it on the page and feeling like, oh, I've done it, this is great, or your friends read it and they think it's great, or your mom read it. I think it's really important to challenge yourself and to ask yourself if you've done what you need to do to really make this piece shine and to make it stand out. A lot of our magazines, we're going to get, hundreds, thousands of submissions. Clark's World, for example, is seeing probably 13, 14,000 submissions a year. They're publishing roughly 84 stories. So what are you doing to make sure that your story is going to even be seen, it's going to even be read? Is what is different about what you're doing? What is special? I think that is the main thing that I would say more writers could think about before they send in their work. And if you've done that stuff, send it in. Don't self-reject, but do think about it.
How about you, FJ?
I think the most important thing is when a magazine or a press has limitations like genre or topic, is to really make sure that your stuff is appropriate for what they want. Mobius is mainly tends to go for more political work. I'm really receptive to SF null stuff, but the subtitle of the journal is the Journal of Social Change, and sending me Flower Garden or Dead Grandma poems is like, why are you wasting my time and yours? And the same thing with speculative journals. If the work isn't speculative, why on earth are you submitting it? So I think that everyone who submits should go to the site, read at least a couple of poems, and get an impression of what the publication is interested in. And I will say this, a journal that has no sample work online has only itself to blame for receiving inappropriate submissions.
And how about you, JW?
I mean, I think I agree with everybody's points, but it's, you know, FJ said, I believe, every piece will have an editor out there that it's right for, you know, and like Arley said, every piece should be elevated before you send it out. So it's making sure that, yeah, you do a quick check, you know, make sure, I forget who said it, but it was, you know, before you leave the house, take one thing off. It's like, okay, before I send this out, is this what I want to present to the editor? Is this what I want to send out, you know? And obviously I don't reject stories for, you know, a spelling mistake or this or that, but sometimes it is kind of indicative of how much the story has been looked at, how much the story has been worked over. When there's, you know, a third or fourth grammatical mistake in the first couple pages, it's one of those like, okay, you finished typing it up and you sent it to me without rereading it. It's, you know, I do this with academic stuff whenever I write. It's finish it, put it away for a few days, and come back to it with a fresh set of eyes and reread the whole thing and, you know, see if there's points that you can improve, points that are redundant, you know, take one thing off before you send it out of the story.
And I'm just going to add to all those comments, follow the submission guidelines. About a third of the submissions I get do not follow them, and it's not a great introduction. This is another topic that I think might be mysterious to most writers. I know when I got my start, form rejections felt like a form of insult, but they are not meant to be. So I'd like to ask each of you, when and why will you use a form rejection? Let's start with Arley on this one.
So I would say most of our rejections are forms. Christy and I differ slightly. Christy very, very rarely will send a personal rejection. She feels, you know, she's also a writer. She has published a lot of her fiction. She feels like the personals she has received have never been helpful, or they have been like contradictory. One person will say one thing, another person will say another. So for her, she feels like she's probably not going to say anything miraculously helpful. So, you know, the best thing she can do is not get you hung up on what she has to say. Just here's the rejection, go send it somewhere else, keep going. For me, I'll do more personals than she does, especially if I feel like something was kind of close, or I feel like something was really cool, but this one thing was off, or whatever it is. And I'm more likely to give a personal to somebody who is newer, that I feel like will not only more likely be interested in what I have to say, but they might actually benefit more from what I have to say. But you know, it takes so long to write a personal rejection, at least for me, and it takes so long to read all this material. So like sometimes I just don't have time. You know, even a 2-line personal, I will think about a lot. It'll take me like 30 minutes to write a 2-line personal. So those form rejections are like, you know, they're a necessary thing. So most of the rejections will be form rejections.
And how about you, JW?
Yeah, the form rejection is a tough one from editors because I agree with Arley. You know, sometimes it's the time that you're going to put in, you know, just sounds terrible, but it isn't worth it. I'm going to sit and agonize about how to word this so that it comes across in a polite way and it comes across helpful. And, you know, when I have 30 rejections I need to send tonight because I'm going to get another 20 tomorrow or whatever, I kind of have to get moving and get it done because, yeah, I've got the rest of my life to live. So as terrible as that sounds, usually a form rejection comes when I have to keep trucking. I don't have slush readers and I don't have, you know, the beauty of submittable or any sort of those, you know, submission services. I send an email with each one. So every time, you know, I have to find your email, I have to find the title of your story, I have to make sure I put it in there, and then I put a personal thing, I write something out and I go, ooh, I don't think that comes across correctly. Delete, 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 delete. And then I sit there and I wait and I try to think of something and I go, okay, I got to get moving. So I try to write personal rejections if it's something that I've kept for a long time because I've been trying to find a spot for it. I write a personal rejection if it's something that, you know, just quite wasn't there. And I want to let the author know that, you know, this is a story that you should keep submitting, definitely, but it just isn't perfect here. Or if, you know, something was slightly off with it. And those are tough ones to send. I don't try to send those a ton of just like, hey, next time you submit, you might have more success if you do this. Those ones are always kind of tough to write. But those are the personal rejections I try and send. Otherwise, yeah, a form rejection keeps the train moving.
And you, Rob?
Yeah, it's pretty much two main reasons. One of them, for dark matter, we use a submission software. So a lot of what we do, rejection and acceptance wise, is completely automated in terms of we get an average of anywhere between 500 and 1,000 submissions per call. So like to automate that as much as possible is like really ideal. And also just from like a professional standpoint, I don't think many authors are expecting much more than an accept or reject. The further communication comes after the acceptance, for example. And that's when you start talking with the author and going through the next steps and getting to know them personally and getting to see how maybe we could tinker with some stuff in their work if they're open to it. Like, I just don't think at the submission stage of the publication process, it's an editor's job to try to influence the story or the submission process. Like, we passed on it, so therefore now it's the author's job to take it on to somewhere else or decide whether or not they should revise it or keep it as is. I don't want to influence that process too much, especially, again, like has been stated multiple times in this panel, a lot of rejections have nothing to do with the quality of the story. So like, what could I really add to that if it's just not a fit, for example? So I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to feel like I'm being condescending or having to make them feel better. They're professionals. I don't think they need that. I will, if a story's close, the most I will do personals, but a personal for me just means like, I really enjoy this. It just wasn't a fit. Please submit again. Just so they know, like, this, like, you had some conversations about this piece and it's worthwhile and we'd love to see more. And I think that interaction at that stage of the submission and publication process is like the sweet spot, in my opinion. So.
And FJ?
Well, the only time that I'll send a personal rejection is if there's a piece that came so close that with minor tweaks, I would take it. And I'll say, I think, you might want to fix this part here, and I'd be happy to take another look at it. And I only do that when I think the author, where it really is something minor, and where I think the author is fully capable of understanding and going, oh my God, yeah, of course I should have done that. I think any kind of advice to people who aren't really close to being accepted is not useful. That they tend to misinterpret and revise the piece and send it back. And usually it's even worse than it was before. So I almost always use form rejections, which pretty much come in 3 flavors. Submit again, read the journal to get an idea of what we publish, and we do not consider bulk mail submissions. That's one thing that really really annoys me when I see that it's BCC'd, or worse yet, CC'd to a slew of other editors. And usually these are completely unsuitable submissions in any case. I would like to mention, I believe it's John Joseph Adams for fiction, which is a little different than poetry, who has 3 flavors of rejection, where he said he says didn't grab me, didn't hold me, didn't work for me. And that's a 3-tiered evaluation of your work. Didn't grab me means that right away there was nothing that made him want to keep reading. Didn't hold me means the start was good, but then it got, it got a negative reaction further in. Didn't work for me means that he read it all the way through and then decided that it wasn't quite right. And I don't think that's necessarily common knowledge, but when I heard about it, I was really gratified to find out that I'd gotten a number of did not work for me rejections. So, if you can think of a way to do that, I think it's really useful to the writer to know just how far in they got. Held for further consideration is another nice stepping stone.
I find I send form rejections when there's 100 other submissions I got to get through this afternoon, and I just don't have time, as much as I would love to speak to every author. So moving.
Authors need to realize that the type of rejection is meaningless as far as what it tells them about their work, and that even getting lots of rejections is meaningless. Getting lots of rejections so you get immunized to them as quickly as possible should be the goal of every beginning writer. How fast can you get to 100 straight rejections? It just, you will find someone who likes your work. And if you keep on submitting and writing stuff to submit really frequently, you will get better. It's impossible not to get better if you just keep writing. So trying to nitpick the meaning of please send more work, which is what rejectomancy is all about, is just crazy pants. Don't do that. I have won, I won a contest, $500 for a poem that had already been rejected 19 times by worse places than where it won the contest. There are all kinds of reasons why your stuff can be rejected that may not actually have anything to do with the quality of the writing. Like I said, crapshoot, luck, a matter of taste.
You might just catch an editor in a bad mood in that moment. Although I find if I've sent 5 rejections in a row, I try and step back, check my mood, and then go back into it. Hopefully that works. I also do the same thing if I've had too many acceptances in a row. I wonder if my judgment is accurate at that point. But we don't always have that option because there are so much reading to do. So next off, I'd like to ask each of you, how do you approach the issue of inclusivity when selecting work for your magazine? And let's start with JW on this one.
I've been really lucky in that I don't scrub names or any sort of stuff like that on my submissions, but I've been really lucky in that I have received submissions from tons of people from tons of different places and backgrounds and stories. So, and I find that if you take a cross section of society, you're going to end up with a diverse lineup of stories. So if I go for the stories that I enjoy, I found myself like not on purpose, but just kind of ending up with tons of diverse voices and including people from all sorts of walks of life. So I think I've been really lucky in, you know, you don't want to look at too many people's names or bios too much to be like, oh, who is this person really? And what are they, you know, but it is interesting that once you pick a story and you're like, this is the story, this is, you know, one of the 5 that I'm going to be publishing this quarter. And then you read a bio and you go, oh, wow, this is, you know, what a story, or you know, that's kind of the thing that I've been fortunate to have, I think. So I think, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's it. If you take an appropriate cross section of what you receive, I think you're going to end up with an appropriate cross section of the world we live in.
And how about you, Arley?
Part of it is that, you know, I personally believe everyone has their reading biases, the things that they, you know, formed by their histories and childhoods and reading habits and all kinds of things. But one element of it for us, for Christy and I, is that my reading bias tends to be different than the average editor, I think, at least statistically. If you look at the SpecFic, the Black SpecFic report, for example, that FIA magazine and Fireside magazine did, which showed the statistics of, for example, how many Black authors were being published by major magazines. Most of the statistics were incredibly low. And there are lots of reasons for that, and everybody has their feelings about it. For me personally, the stories that I'm going to be drawn to, being half Black and being gay, and the kind of things that I've picked up along the way, you know, the anthologies that I read, I end up with a different reader bias. So my baseline is different. We end up, you know, just naturally selecting a lot of queer stories. We select a lot of trans stories. We select a lot of stuff like that. But we also do a lot of very deliberate thinking about what we want each issue to look like, that we want to make sure that different people are represented. So we do, at the end of the day, look at our own demographics, because I think personally, my own belief is that part of why so many magazines don't publish demographics is because they don't look at them, and they don't even necessarily know, you know, like, wow, I published 90 stories and only 2 of them were by Black authors, you know. And if you don't look at those demographics, and if those are the demographics you're publishing, it's your magazine, you have the right to do what you want, but that's not what I want to do. So we do look at our demographics at the end of the day, and we make sure that everybody, you know, has a spot, and that a lot of different voices are being seen and heard and read and represented. What we do, so part of what we do is the nature of our own reading biases, and part of what we do is deliberate planning and outreach. For example, we closed for submissions because we were just overwhelmed, but we stayed open to BIPOC submissions, and when we decided what we're going to do for submissions, we decided to stay open to BIPOC submissions all year long. So there are a lot of technical stuff people can do to improve their inclusivity. But, you know, I think a lot of it, personally, I think that genre in general needs to be more deliberate. But again, everyone has their own magazine. They can do what they want. What we do is we are deliberate.
And Rob, how does Dark Matter deal with issues of inclusivity?
Yeah, I mean, inclusivity is it's important to us, and it's part of our mission statement amongst our team. And I will say too, I think the first way to approach it is as a literary magazine, your whole goal and your whole mission is right out the gate is different than trade publishing, in the sense that like trade publishing is each book, each anthology is trying to hit a certain demographic, where the way Arley talks about demographics, I think, is more how magazines operate. We're not talking about necessarily the demographics of our readership, but the demographics of the genre as a whole, and who's writing genre fiction at this time, and where are they writing it from. And I think if the goal of a magazine is not necessarily to produce the next big blockbuster like you want to do with like a novel, for example, it's just trying to bring to the scene what is out there, what is currently composing the genre across races, genders, sexualities, national borders. Because as a conglomerate of voices, you get a much better sense of what this genre is trying to say in this period of human history. And I think that's like really what literature is all about, is what are the stories we're telling and why? And I think if we're silencing certain voices at a certain time, we're not getting a good view of that, and we're doing an injustice to like future readers and future lit professors that look back on like what we're doing today. And so like I do agree a lot with what JW said. I think a lot of it for us comes naturally. There is an element of deliberation there, where maybe we've noticed this TOC for this issue is lacking diversity, and so we do try to want to fix that. Me personally, I'm loving the science fiction that's coming out of Nigeria right now. I'm going to give Solomon Uhihara a shout out. We published him a couple of times at Dark Matter. And what I love about the sci-fi coming out of Nigeria right now, and what I think anyone talking about inclusivity should focus on, without making mandates, of course, in my own opinion, is like there's an authenticity there that we want to promote. And like Solomon and other Nigerian writers, you read these pieces and it's just like, wow, this is something that can only be written from people living in this region of the world with this cultural history and this outlook on life and this geopolitical place in the world. Someone living in Chicago can't write that. And I think that's incredibly, that's the power of inclusivity, is to show that there's like, if literature is a way to like connect human beings through stories and to build communal empathy, well, we're not going to do a good job of that by publishing stories by like an in-group and like excluding 90% of the world. So a long-winded answer to say, yeah, I think it comes naturally, and it's important to us, and we try to do our best. So.
And FJ?
I have pretty much always just read the slush pile and accepted what I liked, but I tried to be broad in my tastes. A number of years ago, when the Veda report came out on the underrepresentation of women in literature, that was when I first looked at gender ratios in my submissions pool versus what I was accepting and publishing. And I found that the ratio of male submitters to female submitters, at least going by the apparent gender of the names, there were anywhere from 2 to 3 times as many men submitting, and I was accepting in that ratio. And I thought, this doesn't bother me. I don't seem to have a bias as far as gender is concerned when I'm, not paying any attention to it. And it seemed to me that if women wanted to be accepted at a higher rate, they needed to submit at a higher rate. And this is something that has been a problem for a long time. Men tend to be more persistent. I don't know why. Men can submit awful things. There were several guys who would submit like more than once a week, awful stuff that wasn't appropriate at all. And they got less and less pleasant rejections as a result. And at some point with some of these people, I said, I'd really rather not see work more than once a quarter or something like that. And they would keep submitting anyway. Whereas women, I would say, wow, this came really close. This particular poem was my favorite of what you sent. I hope you submit again. And they would never submit again. That's for whatever reason, women were more easily discouraged, which I found really sad. Now, as far as ethnicity goes, that did not seem to be a problem. I'm not aware of the race of a lot of my contributors, but those who I do know, because they mentioned Cave Canem in the bio or whatever, I get the impression that both Mobius, which would be expected because of its political and very pronounced left-wing orientation, and also Starline are have a fairly high non-white component. At this point, we finally have Starline bios online. And so it's possible to go through the bios and form a certain, and evaluate them statistically. I have not done this, but I think it would be time. One more thing about gender I'd like to say. For a long time, it's been claimed that women were underrepresented in genre fiction. As far as poetry goes, or at least as far as what we're seeing in SFPA, there was a fairly abrupt shift in somewhere around 2007, 2008, which is when I joined SFPA, from the award winners being 80% male to the award winners now being about 80% female. There is something wrong with both extremes. I don't know what to do about it, but I think this is something that needs to be addressed. I think maybe SFPA is kind of a forerunner in that regard, but this is something that is happening. I think there's a bit of a backlash that is producing this effect. And if it's wrong for 80% of literary award winners to be men, it's equally wrong for 80% of them to be women. I don't know if the other editors are seeing this happen in what they do, but in SFPA, it's very evident across all the awards we offer, which are given by popular vote of the membership, I should add.
Hopefully our field and our world is moving towards balance and equality in general. And thank you for all attempting and doing the work to make this happen. It's important that we have these discussions. Wow, this hour has flown by, so I'm going to cut a few questions, unfortunately, and just throw a few more at all of you. It's been very illuminating to hear what everybody has to say, but I also wanted to ask, editors wear a huge variety of hats in their working lives, and it can be quite overwhelming, as everyone has stated. I know it certainly is for me. How do you balance these workloads and the hierarchy of duties that come along with running a magazine and editing and reading slush and so forth? Let's start with Rob on this one.
Well, I'm actually not the best person to ask. I have a very scattershot work style. So because like you mentioned in the beginning, I'm the editor-in-chief, but also I'm the art and creative director, which means I pretty much anything you see graphic design wise or in the print issue that's what I've designed. And for me, it works because I get bored really easily with doing one thing. So I love being able to jump around. So for like the many hats thing for me, I think is actually like a huge plus. That's why I love owning my own, in the past, owning my own business and being an entrepreneur. Also, being able to have control over like what you do. To me, dark matter is like this ultimate art project I've always had in my mind, like this ultimate project. Yes, it's a business too, but like I kind of see it as like this thing I've always wanted to do, this grand vision of how to bring my different like creative and intellectual passions together. And so yeah, that's just naturally a hat rack, and I love swapping those out. So for me, it's just a natural part of the process, and it keeps me fueled, actually. It keeps me from being bored or discouraged, because whenever I get caught up on one task, I can move to another. I could use the left side of my brain than the right side, and so on and so forth. So for me, it's kind of a very cathartic thing to be able to do multiple jobs.
And FJ?
I'm not bored. Both Mobius and SFPA are volunteer projects for me. I tend to be overloaded with those deadlines and the deadlines for paying projects from the presses I work for. The one thing I regret is that I don't have enough time for my own work at this point, and that's something that needs to change. But I am having a good time.
And how about you, Arley?
In my case, I'm lucky that I have a co-editor-in-chief, Christy Yant, and she's been, editing for Lightspeed, publishing and editing Lightspeed and Nightmare for a long time. Before Wendy Wagner took over Nightmare, when it was John, Christy was helping out. So she does a lot of the behind the scenes, gritty publishing work that I don't have to deal with. And it's great to be on a team with somebody. For example, recently, I was just overwhelmed with dealing with stuff, and she stepped up and took over a lot of the stuff that I normally would do. And then I've done that for her as well. And, we have people who help us with a lot of stuff. Like we have proofreaders like Anthony Cardno, Devin Marcus, Chloe Smith does copy editing. We have a couple of editorial interns. Christy and I still do the bulk of the editing stuff, but what I do is mostly acquisitions and editing specific pieces, and I do like some publicity stuff and submitting for awards and all this, which ends up being like submitting for awards is a lot more work than people realize, and it's super tedious. And then a waste of time at the end of the day. but yeah, it's, for me, it's really nice to be part of a team and also to have the support of John, who I can turn to and be like, what do I do with this? At Locus, we have a staff and I do completely different work there. And it's super busy. I work more than full time. A lot of people put in, you know, tons and tons of hours just to produce that magazine. It's definitely a team effort. It's more work than anybody realizes, but you know, it definitely comes down to everybody pitching in, doing their part. I know what I need to do every issue. Tim knows what he needs to do. Liza knows what she needs to do. And if anybody, you know, falls apart or can't make it, it becomes very difficult to put together an issue. So yeah, it's a family process over there.
And how about you, JW?
I have the unfortunate task and the good luck to be on my own completely. I do all the slush reading, I do all the design, I do all the promotion, I do the editing, I do everything. So for me, it requires an immense amount of organization. I've got Excel sheets and I've got, you know, papers everywhere with table of contents and you know, all these sorts of little ideas and things of, you know, themes or you know, we commission all, I always say we, which makes it funny because it's really just me. But I commission all the cover art for every issue. So a lot of the cover art actually is me, you know, going online, whether it be on an art website or, you know, an Instagram or Twitter or wherever, and finding artists and reaching out to them and figuring out, okay, you know, how much do you charge? You know, can we figure something out? Here's the story I'm thinking, working with them. So I feel like a lot of it is organization and making sure that my inbox is decluttered. But the other side of it is that I get help from people from time to time. And those are the people who usually get the thankless jobs of me, you know, approaching them with a story or a cover and going, what do you think? What do you think? You know, just to have them go, yeah, it looks great. And I go, okay, good. So like Rob said earlier, with a magazine, you can't push anything back. You kind of have to work at the schedule you put for yourself. So hopefully you made yourself a schedule that works for you.
I just want to jump into, after Arley spoke, I'd be remiss to not mention that I also have a team that helps immensely, and I could not do it without them. Phil, Anna, Marie, currently Marissa and Alex are helping us out, Eric, Lucy, and we've also been having the great privilege of currently working with Sadie and Ashley of Nightworms on their anthology, and it's been a blast. And yeah, I couldn't do it without any of them. If I forgot anybody, I'm sorry, but I think I got everybody. So
I thank you all for the immense amount of work that you all put into keeping our field healthy and vibrant, because it is an incredible amount of work. I know most of us are usually exhausted. Oh my God, you know, the submissions come in as fast as we send rejections or acceptances, and it can be quite an overwhelming process sometimes. But I thank you all for your hard work. I have one final question for all of you, because people involved in science fiction and fantasy, we tend to think about the future, which is one of the coolest things about our field. And I wanted to ask all of you, what do you think the future of science fiction and fantasy magazines is going to look like? And what do you hope to see in the future of our field? Let's start with FJ on this one.
People are surprisingly still attached to print. When online publications first began, we assumed that they were completely going to displace print and it would become, you know, an artifact of the dead past. But the tactile qualities, the easier to look at, really, qualities of a print page have made a lot of people hang on who are used to print, and a lot of younger readers also prefer to read in print. So that's just kind of an interesting aspect that I don't expect print to go away.
And how about Rob? What would you like to see moving forward in our field?
Well, what I think one of the changes we'll see is to do with the business side of publishing as a whole, including magazines. I think the way contracts, royalties, licensing is going to completely change in the future for the best. I think royalties are a strain on the system right now. They're paid completely inefficiently. Oftentimes they're missed, or your publishing houses are cutting checks for $10. And there will be ways to spread that wealth, pay out royalty, and also license work, I think, is going to be different in the future, where artists and writers will have will be able to be much more proactive and much more entrepreneurial in the way that they license and share their work and monetize it. Into what I like to see, or what I hope continues, yeah, I agree, print. I mean, obviously, the dark matter does print, but I'm a firm believer in the message is the medium, or the medium is the message, excuse me. And print just offers a different interaction with storytelling, and it gives a complete, I think you can actually do read stories differently on print and on digital. And from a business side, print is just always great because it's a great way to walk into a bookstore and as the owner of Space Cowboy Books, like that's so important. It keeps the entire industry and the entire ecosystem going. Providing something to put in any bookstores, people that could share, someone could buy it and then give it to their friend, and they could have that tactile experience. They could discover their grandpa's attic 20 years from now. I don't think they'll ever go away, and I'd be upset if it did. So let's keep it going.
And JW, what would you like to see moving forward?
See, it's interesting because I love print, but the magazine is right now only digital. And I did this mainly when I started just because I couldn't have imagined also doing a whole print run every issue on my own. And I always kind of say this to people that, you know, one day I hope to get there, and hopefully I'll have, you know, some people with me at that point who I can count on to help me with that. But as of right now, it's only digital. And the reason I do like that is because, you know, with phones and tablets these days, you can have 65 books available like that. You know, you can sit down on the bus and decide suddenly you want to read Hexagon, you know, and pull up your phone and there it is. And I find that the ease of access of that is wonderful. You know, I don't know how many times I've, you know, eating my breakfast or drinking my coffee, I've pulled out my phone and go, oh, so-and-so's issue dropped the other day. Brilliant. And just start reading stories. You know, I love that you don't have to, you know, put the order in and wait. But yeah, everyone's got a point. There's something nice about cracking the spine on a brand new book.
And Arley, what are your thoughts on the future of SF and F?
Real quick, JW, did you see Kim's suggestion?
Oh no, annual print anthology. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm working on the anthology right now for year 2, and it is something that I've considered. And not that this is like time for an announcement, but I'm hoping that something might get done, but no promises. But we'll see. We'll see. It might be a limited print run, but yeah, you know, once a year to really go all out would be awesome. So yes, it's in the old brain.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there are like websites that are experimenting with different formats of storytelling, different modes. You know, for example, Cadwell Turnbull is doing something different in terms of the storytelling on his new experimental website with a small group of people. I saw one that was like an interactive fiction website. So I think like on the one hand, I think there are going to be just different experiments around the way that story is delivered. I think that story is so crucial to, you know, humankind that it won't go away anytime soon in whatever form. But I do think that we're going to see different things that maybe we haven't even thought of yet, that I can't think of, you know, in the next decade. So I'm excited for that. It's always a question of what's going to actually stick and what's just going to be experimental or a trend. I think print is great. I personally love print, but print is really tricky. You know, I can name off the top of my head several magazines that experimented with print and it didn't work out. And especially with the era of COVID, you know, distribution, pretty much anyone who runs a print magazine is, you know, I don't know about Dark Matter actually, but I can tell you for a fact that many of us who run print magazines are feeling serious repercussions of COVID. Like, I mean, magazine killing repercussions. Yeah, stories sliding over into games, exactly. So, you know, but at the same time, Rob is absolutely right. Like, print reaches audiences that digital does not reach. One of the things that COVID exposed was the fact that not everyone is online. Not everyone has the same, you know, access to internet. Not everyone wants to be online. I know Locus has tons of print customers who don't even have an email. And, you know, huge swaths of the country do not, you know, I think that if you're in the digital age and you're very used to using cell phones and all your friends are, you kind of exist in this bubble where you create this fallacy that this is normal, and it's not everybody's normal. And if you want to talk numbers, just look at book sales. You know, ebooks are a fraction of the overall sales of books. And that is a fact. You can look up the reports in Locus where we publish financial reports for you. So, I mean, lots of people love print. But I also think digital isn't going anywhere. I think the challenge of digital is, you know, and Neil Clark talks about this, the challenge of digital is that a lot of us are speaking to the same crowd. We're speaking to the same people, the same group. We all have the same Twitter followers. So I think the challenge of digital is reaching new readers. And, you know, magazines like Rob's has an advantage because if you're in a bookstore, you're reaching a different set of readers than the people who are reading an online magazine. And so if you're online and in print, you're maximizing your potential. So I think the survivability of magazines and of genre, I think personally that exists in finding ways to reach new readers. And, you know, because we can't all be speaking to the same 1,000 people for eternity. Like at some point, you know, people can only subscribe to so many mags, they can only donate to so many Kickstarters. At some point, they're going to run out of money. They have to make choices, and then somebody's got to close. So, you know, survivability depends on finding new readers. But I think story is essential, and it's going to continue to exist for a very long time in different forms, whatever form that is. So, yeah. Oh, but my biggest hope, one of my biggest hopes is, if you think, you know, going back to demographics, is that more power structures shift. A lot of the editors are white, a lot of the editors are male. I'd like to see more magazines, more pro magazines pop up that have, you know, Cherie is holding it down for F and SF, but not that many pro magazines have Black female or, Asian female editors. So, we can't say, Rob's running dark matter. It's not my place to say, Rob, you need to step down. You need to hire, a Muslim from the Middle East to run your magazine. It's Rob's magazine. That is what he started. It's his right to run it how he wants to run it. But I do hope that in the future we see more publications, more power structures with broader demographics, because I personally believe that's the only way we're going to see more equity in genre. It's great if people try to do stuff, but where the power lies right now is still with predominantly straight white males. So I personally would like to see that change.
And I think when those magazines do show up, we need to make sure that we're supporting them as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, absolutely, like, there's a lot of support for FIA, which I love. And I wish that more, magazines would follow in their footsteps and be like, okay, we're going to be an Asian diaspora magazine, and then everybody help them, support them, and promote them. We're going to be this, we're going to be that. And, I don't necessarily believe that only owned voices can write certain types of stories, but I do believe, I can't remember who was talking about like perspectives, and that this story could only come from this place. I do believe that own voices give a certain perspective, and those power structures need to be shaken up. And you're going to read stories in FIA that you're not going to read anywhere else, and we need it.
Well, my great hope is that literacy will be a big part of the future. In California, we have a 24% illiteracy rate, and literacy is the greatest weapon that we have against ignorance and against bigotry. To be able to enter the thoughts of another, to learn that empathy. And I thank all of you editors, Arley, JW, Rob, FJ, thank you so much for your work, your tremendous hard work, for being able to help get these writers' voices out there for all of us to read and keeping our field healthy and alive. Thank you to our audience for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online. This has been a wonderful discussion. I wish I had another hour with all of you, but we'll just have to do it again sometime. So thank you all. If there's any parting statements, now would be the time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. Until next time, everybody.